A Colorado judge has deemed Robert Louis Deere incompetent to stand trial. Now, if you don't remember who Robert Louis Deere is, he is the person who shot up a Planned Parenthood in Colorado Springs, killing 3 individuals, including 1 police officer, and also injuring others. Now, during court proceedings, many things happened that led to the judge asking for a psychiatric evaluation to determine whether or not he was competent enough to stand trial. And based on what 2 psychologists and 1 detective testified, the judge has decided no. We need to send him to a psychiatric hospital where he will receive treatment. And then 90 days later, the hospital will reach back out to us and let us know whether or not he's made any improvement. And once he is competent to stand trial, he will. So,
yeah, I just want to add real quick. The judge asked the psychiatrist to make that assessment, and then he looked at him and he said, oh, right, he's white, Christian, and a right-winger, so treatment it is. Okay, now Anna's going to give you the full details, and she doesn't exactly agree, okay? But once you see the full details, I'll make my case again, because there's no way that a black guy or a Muslim terrorist is going to get treated the same way as this terrorist did. That's what he is. He's a terrorist. He said he went to go terrorize people who were doing abortions, and he did, and he killed them, and he wanted to terrorize more of them for a political reason. That's what he did. But if you're
for a religious reason as well.
Political and religious reason. But if you're a right-wing terrorist, oh my God, you must be crazy.
Okay.
If you're a Muslim terrorist, oh no, you did it for religion and political reasons. You're very dangerous. Put them away for life or execute them right away. White guy, treatment. Tell us about the treatment.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys all the details in a second, but before I get to all of that, we do disagree to some extent, right? Because I mean, I don't know if you agree with the judge's decision. I do agree with the judge's decision. I think that the judge is doing the right thing.
I think whether the judge's decision is accurate or not, now this you might think is a funny thing to say, but I'll explain why. Whether it's right or not, he's biased, okay? And he doesn't even know that he's biased. Because you put a Muslim terrorist that killed 3 people in front of that judge, no way! He says, oh, let's give him treatment, okay?
Okay.
So the answer is, Anna, maybe they should both get treatment because they're probably both crazy, but it depends on the case. But I don't trust these people to make decisions based outside of their own bias. And when I say they don't know their own bias, this is what I mean by it. It's not like they're like, oh, we hate the Muslims. Oh, I like white people. I'm going to say he should get treatment instead. No, they just assume like, oh, that guy looks like us. Wow, he's crazy. Who would kill 3 people because of these crazy political religious reasons? That's crazy. No, let's get him treatment. They see the same exact kind of terrorist, but he's brown and he's Muslim. Well, that's not crazy. That guy's a terrorist. Put him away for life. Execute him already. Let's be done with it, right? They don't know that they have that bias. All right, but give us the details.
All right. Look, this judge has not presided over Muslim terrorists that I know about, okay? So
yes.
I have no idea whether he has that bias. I think it's unfair to say that about him.
Yeah, the affluenza teen judge also, well, you don't know for sure.
I know,
but she's, oh, it looks like my kid. It looks like my kid. He's got affluenza. He's free to go.
Okay, so let me give you the details, and then you guys can decide for yourselves, okay? So the Washington Post reports that Colorado 4th Judicial District Judge Gilbert Martinez decided that Deere will be sent to the Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo for psychiatric treatment, okay? Attorneys had revealed in court filings that a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation found Deere to be incompetent, and mental health evaluators said during the April hearing that Deere suffers from delusions. A police detective said that Deere appeared lucid during his interviews and had said he did not want to claim insanity, okay? So keep in mind that Deere remains charged with 179 counts, including first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and assault. So with that said, he is not going to have these charges dropped against him because he's claiming insanity. In fact, he thinks he's not insane at all. Now, the reason why the judge ordered these psychiatric evaluations is because during court proceedings, he would do random outbursts, he would talk to himself, and he refused to comply with the lawyer that's representing him. He has a public defender, and he's like, I don't want to deal with a public defender. I want to defend myself, okay? Now, if he's muttering to himself, if he's saying all sorts of crazy delusional things, he's refusing to comply with the lawyer, and on top of that, he insists on representing himself, it is the judge's obligation and responsibility to make sure that this person is competent when they stand trial, so the case or the verdict doesn't get thrown out because of a technicality. So the defense doesn't come forward and say, hey, you know what, this was unfair, this guy wasn't competent, he didn't know what was going on, he didn't understand what was happening, and so as a result, we're going to have to do a retrial. So I understand why the judge made this decision. Okay.
Okay.
Now let me give you more details, okay, as to what he said.
I'm going to step in for a second, okay? So a lot of the Muslims who were detained said they didn't want lawyers. They wanted to represent themselves. So I don't know the degree to which we went through procedure to determine their competency, okay? I do know that none of them were declared incompetent or needed psychological treatment. They're like, well, I get it, of course. He's done it for political and religious reasons. Now, the reality is those lunatics think that they're talking to God, okay? And now this lunatic thinks he's talking to God. But he's white, so, no, he's crazy. The other guy, he's not crazy. No, him killing people makes sense to us because look at him. Just look at him, right? So I asked Anna over and over again today because I didn't want to come out and say all this and make assumptions if it turns out they had real concrete evidence. Like, or the psychiatrist saying the guy thinks that there's monkeys flying out of his ass and they secretly control him, right? Okay, that dude is crazy. Okay, that makes it more likely. Here, he doesn't want to represent himself, like many of the Muslim detainees. Yeah, he killed people one of the psychiatrists said what he did wasn't logical. No shit, Sherlock, right? When you kill 3 people for no reason, it's not logical. They say, well, he thinks that these people are selling baby parts. At least 35% of the country thinks they're selling baby parts. Should we put all of them in psychological treatment? Maybe we could have that conversation, okay? But when you're a right-winger and you do it, no, he just thought, he had the wrong assumptions. But go ahead, read me, Anna, more about why they put him away, put him into treatment.
Let me clarify one thing. First of all, some court records are sealed, okay? So we don't know what the exact testimony of these psychologists is. They're psychologists, not psychiatrists. But with that said, I don't know. I trust the 2 psychologists and the detective who have more facts than the media's interpretation of this.
The detective said that he did not want to claim insanity, that Deer did not want to claim insanity,
right,
and that he appeared perfectly lucid.
Yes, he did say that he appeared lucid, but he also testified that he was delusional, okay? So being lucid doesn't mean that you can't be delusional, okay? So anyway, let me give you the details about what happened during the court proceedings, what we do know that led to this ruling. So Deer interrupted proceedings more than a dozen times, yelling, "I am guilty, there's no trial, I'm a warrior for the babies," later adding, "protect the babies." I'm going to stop you for a second just to give good context. That is almost literally what a lot of the Muslim detainees do. They interrupt the proceedings and they say, I am guilty, I did it for Allah, and I did it to protect Muslims. Okay, well
it's almost identical.
Okay. So, but understand something, Cenk. If the Muslims seem like they're incompetent and they're not given the same treatment, then yes, there is a bias in the justice system. We all know there's a bias in the justice system.
No. Look, first of all, 50% of the country won't admit that at all.
And on Twitter think that there's no bias against Muslims, okay? That's a very small group of morons, and I'm unconcerned with what they have to say. But with that said, okay, there is a bias against them. We all know that, right? But that's not to say that the way the judge ruled in this case is unfair. The way the judge ruled in this case is right. Let me give you more details. He accused his public defenders of conspiring with Planned Parenthood against him. He also said things like...
Yeah, he's a conservative loon who thinks that the government is conspiring against him. 35% of the country thinks that. Go ahead.
He believes that Robin Williams committed suicide because 2 weeks before he did so, he criticized Obama or made a joke about Obama, and that Obama is the Antichrist who convinced Robin Williams to kill himself.
Now, let me counter with this. We just did a poll earlier in this week. A public policy polling asked Trump supporters, 24% of them think that Scalia did not die, Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia did not die of natural causes. He was murdered. If they were in this court, the psychologists would say they're Looney Tunes. No, not guilty. Not guilty, but requires psychological treatment. 65% of them thought not that Obama's the Antichrist, although that would be a good question. I bet you'd get a very high number, okay? 65% of them thought that Obama's Muslim. Only 13% thought he was Christian. So this, you know what this guy is? He's a very standard, yes, radical right-winger, right? But, and I'm not saying he's a moderate Republican, but radical right-wingers, 25 to 35% of this country. That's what they are. That's what they believe.
Come on.
So they don't kill people. They don't kill people. I'm not saying lock up the right-wingers, right? This guy killed people for a political and religious reason. He's a terrorist, and we're having a conversation because he's white and right-wing and Christian about how we should treat him. Are you going to be okay, Robert?
Cenk, you can't have a person stand trial if they are not competent, if they're delusional, if they're crazy, if they refuse to cooperate with their lawyer. They can't stand trial. That's how our justice system is supposed to work.
So again, let me clarify. So because...
And by the way, I fucking despise this guy, okay? There's the vengeful side of me that doesn't want justice for this guy. I want it to be an injustice for him. I want him to stand trial while he's incompetent. I want him to execute him. I want them to execute him. That's the irrational side of me, right? But the part of me that values a fair justice system wants them to carry this out the right way. And I want the same to be done for everyone, regardless of their religious background, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their nationality.
So, Anna, at the core of it, we totally agree. Because my whole argument is for a fair justice system. And I'm now going to clarify for the second time that I'm not saying that this guy definitely is not crazy. I'm not saying he shouldn't get treatment. And I'm not even saying that this judge is wrong in this particular case with this particular ruling. What I'm saying is I would like some degree of fairness where everybody is treated the same way. And that is not the system we have now. Because if you're the wrong skin tone, the wrong religion, or the wrong political persuasion, you will not get the benefit of the doubt. But if you're of the one that most of the people in power ascribe to, you get all of the benefit of the doubt. That's why when the Charleston shooter goes into court, but if he's Muslim, we're getting execution ready. We're having debates, literal debates in the United States Congress about whether he should have any rights. There's now a whole party that says that Muslims, if they are arrested, shouldn't have any rights, okay? So now there's nuances to that argument, whether they're citizens or they were not, and if they are, now there's a new wing of the Republicans that says kick them out of the country entirely or don't let them back in, etc. But that is a debate they're having about if they should have any rights at all, okay? But, and again, back to the Charleston shooter, okay? He goes in and instead they're like, oh man, let's find forgiveness for him, and then we have those poor people who got shot at, who survived, looking for forgiveness for the white shooter who shot the black churchgoers. And then the cops get him a burger. I just interviewed two people from Baltimore just earlier in the week. One of them, her brother was killed because he made an illegal U-turn, and they dragged him out of the car and beat him to death, okay? Mm-hmm. The other one, he got beat in front of his 3-year-old kid in his own driveway because they made up something about a seatbelt, okay? Mm-hmm. And if there weren't people that came out, they might have killed him. But you kill 9 black people in a church, they bring you to Burger King, right? So we don't have a fair justice system here, okay? So if they treated everybody the same way they treat deer, then okay, we've got a humane system, and we're having a real determination of whether someone is crazy or not crazy, whether they should get psychological treatment or not. Now, as a progressive, I don't mind the psychological treatment if you think that he needs it, and it doesn't mean the charges go away. So on that, I agree with you. But I see it every time for a right-winger who's white, they get all of the benefit of the doubt, right? Because everybody in the system goes, oh man, that guy looks like me, or that guy acts like me, or that guy is, one of us, not one of the others. When it's one of the others, crush them and be done with them. They don't get any treatment.
Right. Look, to be fair to Judge Martinez, I don't think he looks at this loony guy and thinks, oh, he's one of me.
No.
But I do think, hold on. I do think that, I don't, not with this judge in particular. I think that oftentimes when there is, a minority that's standing trial for a terrorist act, okay, what's deemed a terrorist act, there is pressure by that judge to act a certain way, to rule a certain way. Because there is a bias that's perpetrated by the media. There's a paranoia that's perpetrated by the media about specific groups of people in the country. And so if you don't rule the way that, that narrative forces you to, well, then you're in for a world of hurt. So I agree with you that there are biases in our justice system. We've talked about the 2-tier justice system several times on this show. I agree with you on that. But with that said, this guy is not fit to stand trial, and we're not putting him in treatment because we want to be nice. We have a very punitive justice system. We're doing it so the trial works the way it's supposed to.
Okay, last two things. One is, look, the problem is systemic. It's not one particular judge or two psychologists. But those two psychologists, look, if you have them interviewing Muhammad Abdul, who just shot 3 people because of Allah, I would be super surprised. You pick them, right? And I don't even care what their race is, because there are assumptions built in by the media, as you say, right? By all the propaganda is, if they're in this category, they're goddamn terrorists, right? If they're in this category, oh God, he's like, he's crazy. He's crazy. Why else would he do it? Why else would he do it? He's crazy, right? And then you have the judge. If a judge put a Muslim terrorist who had just shot up a place into psychological treatment, I mean, if there's an election where the different localities have different rules, judges get elected in some places, he's gone.
Yeah.
He's a goner.
I agree with you on that. There's no question about
right.
that.
And even if he's appointed, if he's in the South, for example, you think he's going to get appointed again? No, he's gone. You're not giving any psychological treatment to no goddamn Muslim terrorist. But if you're a Christian terrorist, and that is exactly what this guy is, exactly. He says it. He said, I killed these people because I believe that God wants me to protect the babies. It's almost literally what the Muslims say. Replace babies with Muslims and you have it, right? Okay, so there are 2 rules. You're incredibly blind if you can't see that. And then, look, finally, let me just ask you, okay? Even though I just said you'd be incredibly blind to say it. But do you think that if he was Muslim, that they would have declared him psychologically incompetent?
No, they would not. They would not, and I do think that there is pressure on the judges to rule a certain way, so they don't get any type of retaliation, whether it's career-wise or otherwise, for their ruling. But again, this is the way that it's supposed to be carried out for every type of person, regardless of their background. That's why, I mean, look, Planned Parenthood has responded to this ruling, in a very upset, frustrated way, and I totally understand that. And even though I'm extremely supportive of Planned Parenthood and I understand where they're coming from, again, I do think that this guy is crazy. I do want a fair trial to make sure that he's brought to justice. And we've seen cases where a verdict has been thrown out based on a technicality, and I'm worried about that. That's why I think the judge made the right decision.
I think we almost entirely agree. It's just a point of emphasis that we're making. Of course, I want a fair trial for him. What I'd like is, as an American, I'd like a fair trial for everyone. And that apparently so far in this country is too much to ask for.